and we opened the Global for Women Film Organizations at Berlinale 2024. I just want to let you know that you are the future. Your expertises will become mainstream, and you can count on this.
It is time for fair and equal representation and recognition of all genders.
Até que ponto isso está sendo diverso, né? So this is just to reflect upon how diverse a conversation about diversity is.
We have to work together for ourselves and for future generations.
You can't invest in people unless you actually invest in people. So it's really about getting rid of the gatekeepers, putting the decision-making in the hands of the creatives and the artists, and getting these stories out to the world. And as we move forward with our own ways in leadership, that process is inclusive and centers each individual in the center of their creativity.
Safety, respect, value, voice, consent. Everything is a negotiation. How do you stand up and say to a room of people, this is my truth, this is my experience?
I just thank you all for being a part of this conversation. We really do the work that we do not to check a parity box, but it's because it's our privilege to do so. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Canadian Embassy in Berlin. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our keynote speaker and our panelists to hear your perspectives on how we move forward. How do we build on what we've achieved and we continue to move that dial forward? And so that we see much more innovative and diverse stories on that big screen.
At a time of multiple crises, a struggling economy, an alarming rise of right-wing extremists in the polls, I say now it's time to deliver on gender equality, exactly in these times.
So why did we choose the title Post-Heroic Storytelling? Moving beyond the male gaze and reimagining the female gaze for today. For change to happen, it is not enough to count women and people from other groups who have experienced discrimination and then complain that we are not seeing progress. Sexism and discrimination are firmly anchored in the DNA of the system. That's why it doesn't help to make small adjustments here and there. We need to look at why certain types of films are successful with decision makers and others are not. This concerns the stereotypical evaluations of film material on the part of decision makers who often devalue stories about women as trivial, emotional, and domestic, and see stories about men as epic, universal, and of great importance. Concerns the distribution of funds. We need mandatory measures and quotas where public money is involved. It concerns the working conditions behind the camera, which make it impossible to reconcile family and career, and which entail a systemic risk of boundary violations. We see this in the incredibly high numbers of sexual harassment and violence. It affects the stylistic devices and imagery that serve the male gaze. Last year, as a part of the Global Forum, we showed Brainwashed Sex Camera Power by Nina Menkes. Her film deciphers the patriarchal narrative codes that are hidden in supposedly classic shots and camera angles. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody sees. Light, visual effects, angles, and the choice of framing seem to glamorize women, but in reality they are objectified by these means. This visual grammar of cinema has also other dimensions. It helps to legitimate and reinforce the male position of power. It supports the discriminatory conditions in the film industry behind the camera and influences how we view women in everyday life and how women see themselves when they look in the mirror. It concerns the narratives of historical events in which women and people of marginalized groups are missed. Furthermore, they are written out of the collective history of humanity. And it affects the dramaturgy of films and patriarchal narratives. From the book The Hero with 1,000 Faces by myth researcher Joseph Campbell, a kind of recipe has been developed in Hollywood named The Hero's Journey. This hero's journey serves the narrative of strength and competition, and often the age-old patriarchal narrative on an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the whole concept of competition and domination of the world leads more and more to scarcity. When we look around the world, which is dominated by wars and crises and the exploitation of nature, then it's time that we use this powerful tool of filmmaking to tell other stories. In my work, I'm often asked whether there's a female gaze as opposed to a male gaze. For me, female gaze is not a concept that can be applied. It is a space in which women and people of other marginalized groups are not exploited by the gaze of the camera, but in which we look at others with empathy, with the help of the camera, and in which it is about connection and not exclusion. The industry talks about the need for innovation and diversity. Innovation comes from the edges. Innovation arises when we change narratives. We find these narratives among people who have so far mostly been excluded from filmmaking and big budgets. But their experiences are valuable. Their wisdom is perhaps the most valuable thing that we have for storytelling.
The topic, which I was told was what the forum is about this year. And I thought that was actually quite challenging. The world around us is so complex right now and has so many conflicts, wars, that it seems people are more looking for heroes instead of non-heroes. At the same time, I think it's quite dangerous to look for heroes, because when you look for heroes, you look for people who can tell you what is right and wrong. You can feel like, I follow this person because he knows or she knows what's right. And I think our world is more complex than thinking in black and white and right and wrong. So I do feel that women with a more complex structure, with a more complex perspective on the world, have a better chance than men to maybe guide us through these rocky times which are around us.
It's already confusing, the gaze, the male gaze, the female gaze. When you talk about the male gaze, people think you're talking about the GAYS. And in particular, male gaze, GAYS, are furious if they find out they're not the topic of conversation. So be very careful when you mention the male gaze around them. Tread lightly. So around 1975, about 50 years ago, Laura Mulvey coined the words the male gaze and the female gaze. And since then, everybody's really been wondering about whether or not a camera can have a gender. Can a camera have a penis? Can a camera be a penis? Good timing. Can a camera be a penis? Can a camera be a vagina? These are questions for another speech. When I came out as non-binary a few years ago, I realized that I was no longer female, nor male for that matter, and so neither of these gazes could I any longer claim. A few years ago, I coined the phrase the trans trickster gaze. I was talking about framing Agnes at Sundance. The camera's trans. It takes wild left turns out of nowhere. As does the logic. People have said that about my work. They've said vigorous beat changes. You never know what's going to happen. Trans gaze, the trans trickster gaze. I don't know. It's not that great. It's exclusionary. Only I and other trans people get to be the tricksters. No women, so that's not good. So I am going to submit a new name for our collective gaze. It's coming out here in Berlin. I'm going to call it, it's not a great name. I just want to prepare you by saying, I don't love this, but it's all we have right now. I'm going to call it the other gaze. The other gaze. Again, not great. Not great for a revolution, but they're words. And as you said, the words that you read are keys. And in a room like this, I want to share with you some words that I read. It was about 15 years ago. I was standing in a bookstore at the magazine rack, which is just amazing. We should just stop there. That I went to a bookstore, that there was a magazine rack, that there were magazines. And I remember exactly where I was. I was in Los Angeles, in Silver Lake, at the Circus of Books bookstore on the corner of Sunset and Hyperion. And I opened a magazine, and I think it was American Filmmaker. And it was about a woman who had just left the public relations business, and she had scraped together enough money for her first feature. The film was called The Middle of Nowhere, and her name was Ava DuVernay. And in this article, she said, filmmaking is a tool to wrest control of the power structure. The reason I know that is because I went back and Googled it. But I remember reading that article, and she also said, I'm just going to say that again because it's so meaningful. Filmmaking is a tool to wrest control of the power structure. And she said that for women and for people of color, protagonism is propaganda for our privilege. She said, protagonism is propaganda for our privilege, and our weapon is our art. And that was 15 years ago. That changed me. I kept going, is protagonism propaganda, or is privilege? It all made sense that these movies, these main characters, these actors, these directors, these writers were all reinstating their own privilege, reinstating white supremacy, reinstating male privilege, reinstating misogyny by simply holding on to the gaze, by having the gaze. The male gaze it's opportunity hoarding. It's opportunity hoarding. It's white men hoarding opportunities for themselves and people like them. That's what the male gaze is. And as my mom would say, very simply, she would just say, enough already. It's like a Jewish woman from Chicago. Enough already. What do I have to say about the male gaze? Enough already. Enough already. Enough already. Enough already. Like me, are worried that there are many great actors who have not yet gotten the opportunity to wear certain period glasses in certain period films. A lot of actors need to play guys in the 70s. They are so interested in The Godfather, they're making a documentary. Men need roles, they need costumes, they need glasses. I know I don't need a head start from these men who are making movies about the male gaze, but I guess I just wish that occasionally some of them would realize that those of us who were not assigned male at birth, those of us who were not assigned white at birth, in patriarchy and white supremacy, we don't have the access to the spoils of white supremacy and patriarchy. We're competing with these guys. The male gaze is a reification of their protagonism. I'm competing with them. I was assigned female at birth. I have no access to patriarchal privilege unless I want to put on a dress and walk on a red carpet. The men who are continuing to opportunity hoard the male gaze and calling it their artistic right to tell their stories, I'm just going to say that the other gaze demands that if you're not using your story to take apart white supremacy and patriarchy, and in fact reifying it, if you're not using your money, your tools, your studio, your script to take apart your privilege, to rebuke white supremacy and patriarchy, you don't get to call yourself an artist. You are not a revolutionary. You are not fighting fascism. You must stand against white supremacy and patriarchy. And men, if you want to make stuff, find ways to center others. You don't even have to tell people you're doing it. But the last thing I want to do is talk about being a trans person and a non-binary person at a festival where the binary keeps coming up. I keep hearing people say it, like women are like this, men are like this, women shoot like this, men shoot like this. There are so many people between the binary. And I'm gonna talk last about Olivia Lang, who's an amazing writer and who wrote that actually fascism needs the binary. That the binary is the soil that allows fascism to take root, the creation of the other. So the last thing I want to say about creating the other gays, we got this, Barbara, don't look sad, we're gonna do it. We're here. We're gonna remember that my words affected you and Ava's words affected me, and who knows when or where or how, but some of these words are gonna affect some of you. So thank you so much for having me.
This is a dream panel for me, if I'm being honest, because this specific topic is something that is just constantly on my mind. Everything, especially as journalists, I used to work for Variety and worked in the trades for a very long time. Constantly looking at, we're taking in film and television always, and at the forefront of my mind is often, I just can't be bothered with some of these male stories anymore. It just does not interest me, and yet that is seemingly all there is sometimes, and it's very, very challenging. So this is a great topic, and we also have some terrific panelists to really illustrate some of these key conversations. There's so much to discuss, and really we'll probably really scratch the surface of it. But I'm curious to hear from each of you in terms of what post-heroic storytelling really ultimately, means to each of you in your work thus far. Anna, did you want to sort of start?
Hello, everyone. I tell a personal story of that. Some years ago, 2 years ago, or 3, I was in Paris, and I had that deep calling to go to a museum. And it was called Museum of Primitive Arts before, but now they changed the name because it's politically incorrect. And I was there, and I recognized so many stories my granny used to tell me, and narratives that I grew up with. And I realized how much we have been dominated by certain narrative. Only one type of narrative that we learn in schools, in universities, including film schools, and it's very Eurocentric. And it totally excluded my stories that I grew up with as something irrelevant, something not quite. And that was the aha moment when I somehow there with all these artifacts stolen from the places, like shamanic drums that are supposed to not be even seen are there. And I'm there and I'm reconnecting to the deep roots where I come from. And there I was like, no, I'm gonna embrace all those stories. So there are hero stories in my granny stories also, but they're very different. Their heroes can be very vulnerable. They can be not strong in the usual concept of hero. And I think this is a big thing, big political thing that we all need to work for, that all these different narratives are reclaimed again.
I think for me, the game changer was, first of all, opportunity, where we hardly got opportunities to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. So when that door opened, or that just slightest crack in the door, we made sure that we were like water. We were just going to maneuver and get those opportunities to tell our stories. But also in getting the opportunity to tell our stories, the ones that came before us, they got the opportunity, but they never had the freedom to tell. It's as if you were given the opportunity, okay, you can be a woman director, you can be a writer, but still there's someone above you that's going to want to judge and maneuver and be like a puppet master to say, but these are the kind of stories that we want you to tell. So they were kind of like putting women in the forefront just for optics. And that also changed as well. And then the next thing after opportunity came freedom, which is when my generation of filmmakers in South Africa came in. So other than opportunity to tell the stories, we were also given the opportunity of freedom to tell the stories that we really wanted to tell and portray them how we wanted to tell them.
I'm Indigenous from Northern Canada. My little village is 700 people. It takes me 12 hours from door to door to get from Toronto to my mom's door. And my language, there's 1,000 speakers. It's Michif, which is a mixture of Cree and French. And there's only 1,000 speakers. My grandma taught me, and I use it in my films whenever I can. My next feature film will be a third in Michif, and I think it'll be the first feature film that will have that much Michif or any Michif in it in Canada. And I'm proud of that. And I tell stories because I want people to see my culture. I'm queer, and Rosie is a film to show that Indigenous people are everything. We're not stoic. We can be. We're funny as hell. We swear. My grandma was the biggest, knew the most swear words. We bring in penis, balls, whatever. And it's just, I want to break down stereotypes.
It's a very spiritual place where women used to give birth, wash the dead, and heal for centuries. And I'm born to that culture. And yes, I wanted to transform this kind of safe space that is there into the dark cinema hall, so that you enter not anymore just to see a film, but you enter this kind of space. And for me, one big challenge that's connected to the topics that we're talking about was their nakedness. We are all naked there. Nakedness is nothing sexual. We are sweating there together, bleeding, all different bodies, all different ages. Yet, having a degree in photography, I know very well that yes, camera has a glance. It's never objective. It's never like innocent. So I was super scared because naked female bodies in society are so sexualized and objectified, like how to make sure that that non-sexual glance comes to the film. So I can just share how I did it, because I think how it's not just what stories we tell, but how we make films. The process is super important. And so, for example, I was testing with a cinematographer on my own body first to find that language and safety. And then I felt it's so important to show to these women, and also not all are women, non-binary, those people there who are naked, body and soul, how I'm capturing them. They need to know what is my visual approach.
As much as they say, okay, you can tell stories, but they still want to curate what kind of stories. And with my feature film as well, the problem is that it's in a world that's only inhabited by women, and you get questions like, the same people that will be like, oh yeah, we need to decolonize these stories, we don't need men. They start questioning, so what are you saying? We are living in a world that has no man. What is happening? And sometimes finders don't give us the freedom to tell. They want to say they support whatever story that you want to tell from whatever world or region that you want to tell, but they still behind the curtain want to direct how. And yeah, it's been difficult and it's annoying actually, but I mean, we maneuver.
So when I was directing my actors, it was not easy, but I was able to communicate with them in a way where I recognize their vulnerability, because they're so putting their souls and being completely vulnerable on camera. And I knew how to talk to them where they felt safe, and to be able to make a film that I wrote as well, direct, produced, and just to have that creative freedom to do what I wanted to do, without anybody else's input, it was really, really liberating. And
we have to change systematically. I mean, I am also connected with this pitching, for example, like how we already pitch, and you are put into this binary world, for example. In my language also, there is no gender. And I think that's the first start where we should reclaim the narrative. We should not go into the trap of they seduce us to their narrative, but we should be, no, yes, I'm vulnerable, I don't know, I'm intuitive filmmaker, I'm emotional,
But how many films were out there by women? in the last season as compared to the ones that were written directed by men. So it's just obviously to close the gap as well in putting out the films that are actually made by women, so that we can also get a step closer to being the most watched, if I could put it that way. So yeah, systematic, as she said, the system also needs to change to allow more women narratives to be pushed out into the audiences.
It's a major reckoning and process, isn't it? And as you say, and it really is sort of everything from the journalists who are kind of asking the questions to sort of up top of the studio level.
I want to just say that it's this interpreting the narrative also. It's like I was just watching one film about Indigenous culture, and there's the huge thing like who interprets that? We can make films, but are they interpreted? Are they actually seen and heard? You know, so it's super important.
The culture change that's also necessary alongside it. And Gail?
Yeah, just give us more money. Give us money because we're freaking amazing. We're fucking talented, and you know, we can do anything.
Exactly.
And also highlight us in your festivals. And
you're absolutely right. Nothing says money like money. So on that note, I will wrap up the panel, but thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you guys as well.
Thank you.